What is up, guys? Rick Hackers here with an insane piece of Taken King information for you guys, and we're talking today about melee weapons in Destiny. That's right, in the Taken King, melee weapons are going to be introduced as an actual equippable new weapon class. They aren't just going to be something you pick up for a little bit in PvE. They are actual equippable, like you take out your rocket launcher and you put on a sword. Now we're going to be talking about that, but we're also going to be talking about the ramifications and issues that actually having a equippable melee weapon gun type will bring up in Destiny. And I'm going to be bringing up stuff that I guarantee you probably haven't even considered when talking about melee weapons. So first, let's get started. How is it confirmed that melee weapons are in the game? Well, in the recent Game Informer trailer, there's one simple scene where the guy is just doing whatever he's doing, but down in the right hand corner, you can clearly see that in his heavy weapon slot, there is a sword. This sword has actual ammunition and is also an elemental type with arc. Now, while I was editing this video, I actually discovered a second clip where the player had a melee weapon equipped as a heavy. This time it has 0 ammunition and also has 0 element. Now that's very interesting, but it's more interesting that the primary weapon, although it looks exactly like the Stranger's Rifle, this is actually said to be the No Time to Explain, a new exotic pulse rifle, and it's basically the exotic version of the Stranger's Rifle. Now this means that you can get melee weapons as legendaries, and it's not just one exotic melee weapon being added into the Taken King, which is good. Now this by itself is pretty damning evidence. The sword is in the game right now. You can get a Hive sword. Now we're first introduced to the sword in the Sword of Crota mission, and it made later appearances throughout the game and was a pretty central focus in the Dark Below DLC, and in fact you would actually use a sword to kill Crota himself. But in all those engagements, when you used a sword for PvE engagements, it was never like this. It never actually had an ammunition count, it was never an element, and it never actually took up your heavy slot. And most importantly, when you had the sword, it was the only thing you were doing. In this still, the sword is on in the background. He's using a different weapon. He's not using the sword right now. He has a different weapon equipped, and also equipped is his sword, so you can switch to your sword, and I think that is pretty clear cut that again we will see melee weapons introduced as a new gun type in the Taken King. Now this goes right hand in hand with something else Bungie said involving Eris. Now Eris you basically never talked to Eris except for to get some of the easier bounties when the House of Wolves came up, but Eris is going to have a much more important role to play when the Taken King launches. Now Bungie themselves have said that in the Taken King, Eris will give you harder and much more expansive missions, and these missions lead to, and again Bungie said this, they lead to rediscovering an old weapon type. Now, if that doesn't scream melee weapons, I don't know what does, especially since Eris is so associated with the Hive, and the Hive are so associated with melee weapons and the whole sword thing. It makes perfect sense. So now that we've confirmed melee weapons appearance in the Taken King, let's talk about what are the ramifications in Destiny that melee weapons will actually cause. Now, firstly, I want to say that adding it to heavy weapons, it makes sense, but I feel like that was a safe thing to do rather than maybe the proper thing to do, because heavy weapons, again, so you're bringing it into PvP and you've got your sword, and yes, it kills in one smack, but I really don't see you emerging from a lot of encounters with rocket launchers unscathed. It looks like if you have a sword, it's certainly going to be fun, and there's certainly going to be some guy on YouTube who puts up a clip that he gets all 6 people with a sword, and it's going to be unreal and so cool looking, but that's going to be few and far between. I just don't really see them being competitive at all. They may have been better suited actually as special weapons. Now this makes people nervous because that means you'd actually see swords coming at you, but if you think about it, It's pretty easy to kill some guy with a sword if he has to get, in melee range and you have a shotgun. You just kind of shoot him in the face, even if he's like doing his wind up, so he's literally doing the animation to come down and smack and kill you. You just shoot him. As a Titan with shoulder charge, yes, I sometimes use shoulder charge on PvP, and let me tell you, everyone hates shoulder charge, and it's understandable. I understand why you guys hate shoulder charges if you're a warlock or a hunter, but to be quite honest, as a Titan, it's not as effective as you think. So much. You just get shotgunned. You're literally in the animation. I have been like so close to throwing my controller places because you actually hear the crunch of the shoulder charge and the whole animation is done and you just die because of a shotgun, and the guy's fine and he runs away with his Felwinter with shock package. So it's not as bad as you think, and having an actual melee weapon wouldn't be as bad as you think. But again, this is pure speculation and I could totally be wrong, and as such, Bungie did certainly do the safer thing, which was put them at heavies. This is going to make sure that yes, they see play, but there won't be any overplay and they certainly won't be overpowered, especially when they're versing up against other heavy weapons. It's also a really interesting thing if you bring up, okay, what will happen with the different types of attack? I really hope to see multiple melee weapons. I really hope there isn't just a sword. Please, Bungie, please actually put several different swords. One smashes, one cuts, they have different lunges but then do different damages or whatever it is, but you can definitely have some variety within the melee class. I'm also so glad that just adding melee weapons into the game is going to make it so that hopefully we will see more melee weapons in future DLCs. So after the Taken King, whatever the next expansion will be, that'll have, maybe some giant warhammer or a daggers or something crazy and awesome like that. So again, I'm super excited that they're introducing melee weapons, and this will add a baseline to add more melee weapons in the future, and that's exactly what you're seeing with sidearms. They only added like 2 in the House of Wolves, but they are confirmed to be added 2 more, and hopefully even more as the DLCs go on. But in any event, you also have to think of what happens to your actual melee attack when using the sword. Because in PvE, if you press the melee attack button, your melee attack simply isn't there and you swing with the sword. Will that carry over into PvP? If I am a Titan and I have a sword equipped as a heavy, what happens to my Fist of Havoc? If I use the Fist of Havoc, do I just, hold the sword in one hand and punch with the other hand? Or do I do a special sword attack? If it is the case that your melee attack is simply now a new sword attack, then you've got to ask the question, what happens to all the things that affect melee in the game? Because I assume that using a sword, that would count as a melee attack. So let's say that when you have one of these new swords in the Taken King, that your Fist of Havoc attack is replaced with the area of effect smash the ground attack with the sword, which makes a lot of sense. So what then happens when I'm using the Monte Carlo? Now, for those of you who don't know, the Monte Carlo's exotic perk is that shooting with it and getting damage with it drastically reduces your melee cooldown. So if I'm using a weapon like that and I have a melee weapon as well, again, what happens? Do I actually regain ammo for that weapon? If I have a full Fist of Havoc and I switch back to the sword, does my Fist of Havoc disappear and I have to recharge the smash the ground thing again? Like, there is a whole bunch of interesting dynamics that has to do with the fact that these melee weapons count as melee attacks, I would assume, and there is a whole bunch of gear in the game right now that affects your melee attacks, and it's going to be very interesting to see how these work in tandem with melee weapons, if at all. It's also interesting to note that in PvE, when using the sword, your super is actually completely replaced by, a new sword super. Now, I doubt they are going to continue this into the Taken King, especially with PvP, but it is something interesting. Now, regardless of all these questions, I am extremely excited for melee weapons to be added into Destiny. And the last question remains, What do you guys think an exotic melee weapon would look like? Leave it in the comments below. That's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. Doing so will let you see Destiny content similar to this. My Twitch channel and Twitter are both linked in the description of this video. So check out my Twitter if you want to get in touch with me, and check out my Twitch if you want to see my ramblings live. Again, I hope you enjoy, and as always, have a good day.